there's a lot of gratification in planting a tree and watching it grow and then taking it up and planting it on the mountain and then coming back 20, 30 years later and seeing a tree that is 40 feet tall with a trunk about a foot through. That's the type of thing I think keeps me going.
When I was born and living my youth in South San Francisco, Sign Hill was a very ugly, barren patch of burned grass with a few eucalyptus trees on it. And over the past 30 years, my father's planted over 30,000 trees on that hill. I talked to my mom about this. We talked about the fact that Daddy did this in prison camp, and in prison camp how he planted things even though the Japanese said he wasn't supposed to, and even though the other people in the prison camp would steal the things that he planted and not share, and all of these things. It just seems that my dad is so stubborn that he's just not going to let anything stand in his way. My mom and I talked about this. We feel that this is what kept Daddy alive in the prison camp. The fact that he was planting things and he was able to plant new life was what gave him hope for the future.
Park superintendent who had the visions of making a park on top of Sign Hill, and he bought 2,000 trees and he got the Boy Scouts to go up there and help him plant them. However, they didn't plant them correctly and nothing seemed to work right, and it was a dry year and the rains were late that fall coming, so these trees were all planted improperly. And then in the next year, the fires went over the mountain and destroyed all 2,000 of the little trees. So after that, I just started on my own a little bit, thought planting a little tree here and a little tree there. When I originally started planting trees, why, I knew nothing about the city really or about the sign. I thought, gosh, I ought to plant trees in these ugly concrete structures here. This sign was put up there in 1928. At that time, the city was a very definite industrial city, and the sign is very symbolic to the people of South San Francisco. Of course, the older people that worked in the steel mills and stuff like that, to them it's very significant. It portrays what they were and what the city, how it became a city and how it thrived. So anytime you talk about taking the sign out, why, gee, immediately you have a big fight on your hand.
Daddy would walk through the forest and he'd collect those seeds. I'd be with him. He'd collect the seeds. He'd put them in his pocket. Then he'd go and he'd put them in a bucket and he'd germinate them. And it would take, maybe one seed out of 100 acorns would work. And then he'd take that one seed and he'd go and he'd put that in this little container with some soil in it, and he'd let it sprout. And he'd do that for a year. And then he'd plant it. And then after 2 years, he'd water that little seedling for 2 years. And it seemed to me that if people knew how much effort it took to plant just one tree.
The whole community keeps looking up at this mountain, and they always tell me they look up and see those trees, and they always think about me, and they comment about how nice it looks now that it has trees up there. Mm-hmm. People, they all seem to think, though, that planting trees is glamorous. That's the glamorous part of this forest. You go up and plant a tree, and they feel you have an instant forest. Well, that is definitely not the case, because we plant these trees up there in the spring of the year, and I go up and water them once a month then after that, and I do the new little trees, the new seedlings that we plant, I water them for 2 years that way. I go up for 2 years and water the seedlings, and after 2 years then I just sort of tell the plants they have to do it on their own, and usually they make it all right.
Why do you think trees are important?
Because they give air, and if there was no trees, then you wouldn't have air and most people wouldn't be alive then.
Greenhouse effect is naturally where we have too much carbon dioxide in the air. It's just like your car, when you have your car parked and the light rays come into your car, but they're broken up into heat waves, and the heat waves are too big for them to get back out again, so then you have the same type of effect in your car when it's parked out in the sun. But if we can plant enough trees, then we're going to prevent that.
It's fascinating to watch if you see it from the very beginning where there were no trees to now where you have a complete ecosystem that sort of feeds itself. It's really nice. At the first, this was grazing land, and you can tell by the ruts on the hill, and so it was basically grass that was burnt every year. So now we're establishing forest again and hope that we're in somewhere close to what it was naturally. And so naturally the animals, for the habitat, it creates a system for them too. So it's kind of nice if you go up here and take a look, and if you really look closely and see the wildflowers whenever they start to bloom and stuff like that, it's just gorgeous, the whole hill.
We had about 5 years of drought to contend with, but at the same time, fortunately, there were no fires, because with the way things that were so dry, it really would have been catastrophic. And during those 5 years, about the only thing he had to contend with were the barbarians that would go up there. There was one guy that just mutilated trees, and then there were other kids would go up and they would pull up trees by the root and throw them down the hill, or people would go up and they would dig up these trees to use for Christmas trees. It just seemed that there was no end to the torture that Daddy had to endure.
So we have all strange things that make it a challenge. A mission blue butterfly, which several years back was called an endangered species butterfly. There was only supposed to be a few colonies of them around, and we had one of them on Sign Hill. Well, one spring, somebody alerted the endangered species people in Sacramento and the environmental people in Palo Alto that we were planting trees up there. We were doing a take on the butterflies. So they came down and they all inspected. The morning before we were to plant the trees, I had dug 1,300 holes up there, and I had the trees in my backyard. They came down the morning before we were to plant, and the guy from the Endangered Species Office said, don't plant them. So then a couple days later I get a letter from them telling them that if I do a take on the butterflies that I could be fined, I think they said $50,000 or spend 5 years in jail. So, well, we didn't plant our trees that year.
Well, after a while we'd get to be afraid of every summer, because summer is when the kids would go up on the hill and burn it down. So every summer we'd kind of hold our breath and cross our fingers and pray that nothing would happen.
One year, when we lost 5,000 trees up there, when we had a beautiful forest and the whole forest went up, there was some kids that were playing with matches up there, and when the fire, they had, I guess in their own simple way, had tried to put the fire out. And when the firemen got up there finally, why, these kids told them, oh, they're Boy Scouts. They were digging around the trees. Well, they weren't Boy Scouts, and they weren't digging around the trees. They were just three little kids that had played with matches up there and had got away on them.
At that point, it was just, I'd say about a third of the hill was burned that time.
A 4-alarm fire threatened a Bay Area landmark this afternoon. The fast-moving grass fire burned its way towards the giant sign above South San Francisco. News Center 4's Anthony Moore is on the scene. He joins us now live with details.
Well, Suzanne, you are looking at the backside of Sign Hill, where there is a sense of relief tonight on the part of homeowners who ring that hill. That's as firefighters mop up this stubborn blaze, which charred about 50 acres. Fortunately, there was no damage to homes or people. Firefighters got the call just after 1, and the blaze proved tenacious enough to require mutual aid. Some 50 men and women dispatched in all, from Daly City to Millbrae. Afternoon winds strengthened, but commanders were not too concerned.
It seems like everything is going okay. The wind keeps shifting on us when we're in the canyons, but we do have lines in place waiting for the fire to get to the line so they can extinguish the fire.
Still, this brush fire did burn dangerously close to at least one block of homes. But the good news is this blaze mostly chewed up grass. Even South City's symbol, the sign, escaped unscathed. Officials say they do suspect arson, but they have no firm ideas as to who.
The whole ground was black, and the trees were black, and there was soot all around. But there was one, the whole grove on the side that had the tallest trees was unscathed. And I thought that was a sign. And then it turned out it was still during the fire season, and 2 more fires broke out that summer. And everyone was like another knife to the heart. And but then I came back up again in the fall, and he said, you know, a lot of these trees are coming back. With the trees, that if over 50% hadn't been burned, then the tree could come back again. And so I went on a tour again in the fall, and it was amazing, because so many of those we thought were lost were not. And then we planned the next Arbor Day.
Hi, I'm Aaliyah Haley from the California Department of Forestry. And the reason why I've come today is to present to the city of South San Francisco the Tree City USA Award. So So you're going to get to fly this flag and fly it proudly.
We sure will.
On Arbor Day, we have a tree planting operation where we invite the city to come up and plant the trees. That's what we've been planting them the last 4 or 5 years. Usually the mayor and some of the state legislators come out and help us with our little program, and then we sent the people up the slopes to plant the trees, and we've had good luck with that. We've had anywhere from 25 to 75 people show up for this Arbor Day tree planting, and they go up there, and in just an hour or two, we've got 400 or 500 little trees planted. So it's worked out real well.
Should we call Grandpa Al the Tree Fairy?
No.
Is he like the Easter Bunny, but he brings trees?
I've been coming here for probably 12 years since Al started the whole thing, after I was elected to council, but prior to that, even when I was fire chief. We were on different sides at that time. Well, he was putting the trees up and my crew kept trying to burn them down somehow. Before Al got started, we had little grass fires. Then now, when Al got through, then we got forest fires. No, the difficulty was knowing firefighters identify where the trees were. It's difficult when you get a fire on a mountain like this or a hill to, what are the trees? The difference between a bush and a tree. Once a tree gets 4 or 5 feet, then you can identify them and then you can protect them. But there was lack of water. Through Al, we ended up with a tank and a pump and some small hoses that we never had before. So it's a lot easier now.
And this is our first time, and we hiked all the way up to the Christmas tree up there, and she fell a couple times, and it was a lot of fun. I think we'll come back next year.
It was a great experience.
It's good for the environment, good for our children, good for the people in South San Francisco and anybody else who wishes to go through our trails and our parks.
Even though we do have a lot of setbacks, why the first few times when the hill burned and we lost 5,000 trees with one match, why I felt like I wanted to go out and sort of tear up the world a little bit. But at this point in my life, why when the hill burns, I just look at it and think, well, nothing I can do about it. And I always remember, well, I've got some more trees in my backyard, so I'll take them up and plant them. But I don't intend to give up. As long as I am capable of climbing up the mountain and handling a shovel, why I'll be working at it.
What he's doing now keeps him alive and keeps him healthy. He's healthier than men 50 years younger than he is, because he's really got a mission. He's got this mission. He has this dream of seeing a forest on that hill, and he's convinced he's going to live until he sees it. And I'm convinced he's going to live to be 125, and he might have to if the hill keeps burning down, but I hope not.